exploit loopholes to obtain automatic citizenship for their children pose a national security threat and will be brought to justice. Ira, how exactly does this birth tourism work, and how widespread is it really?
Well, now that the Supreme Court has ruled that any child born in this country is a citizen, it is an invitation to adversarial countries to send pregnant women here in the late stages of pregnancy, give birth to U.S. citizens. And obviously, they're playing the long game here. We've seen the Chinese are prepared to do that. As a U.S. citizen, potentially they could place these children, when they reach adulthood, into sensitive positions here in the United States that could undermine the security of the country. But even in the short term, the Justice Department is absolutely right. We need to be cracking down on these operations that profit from this, that bring in pregnant women to give birth here in the United States. They also work with partners here in the United States. So there are many things that they can do to shut this down. And it also involves visa fraud. When somebody in China applies for a visa to come to the United States, they're supposed to disclose the reason for being here. And if they say, I'm coming to give birth to a U.S. citizen, that visa will be denied. So they are obviously lying when they apply for the visa. So there are many, many levels that we need to address here.
And I think it's really interesting you bring it's a lot of levels, right? It's visa fraud, as you said, as well. And we also saw that after that ruling, we saw celebrations on Chinese social media, which I thought was very, very interesting. What exactly is this telling us about who specifically is benefited from this practice?
Well, China has been probably the leading country to send birth tourists to the United States. And obviously they're doing this for a reason. It tends to be the wealthier people in China. And again, it goes back to the fact that the Chinese are prepared to play the long game here. You know, in the United States, we think in 2 and 4 year increments. They think in 2 and 4 decade increments. They're looking forward to being able to place people in sensitive positions here in the United States down the line. You know, they are challenging the United States for economic and military supremacy. They may not be able to achieve it today or tomorrow, but they are looking forward, and they think this is one of the ways that they could outpace the United States and become the world's leading power.
So, Ira, you're talking about this long game, right? What would this look like in terms of our national security, our elections, our technological, scientific IP, if this long game is played out and these threats continue to pose a risk to America?
Yeah, as native-born American citizens, when they reach adulthood, these people will be able to be placed into the most sensitive positions, whether it's in the military and defense industry, whether it's in the cutting edge of technology. There are all sorts of things that are reserved for American citizens. Once you have large numbers of American citizens who were born here as birth tourists, that down the line could result in them taking positions in areas where they could feed information, valuable information, to the Chinese government.
So then, you know, the court, it's ruling in favor of birthright citizenship. What legal means exactly does the DOJ have to prosecute in these situations?
Well, they can prosecute people for visa fraud. All of these birth tourism operations have American entities. They have the healthcare facilities. They have other facilities that facilitate birth tourism. All of those are subject to the laws of the United States.
Shut them down.
Criminal, civil penalties imposed. But it also, you know, it draws attention to the fact that we need to be very, very careful about who we issue visas to. We need to prioritize the removal of women who are coming in the late stages of pregnancy. And we need to also hold people accountable when they commit visa fraud. So, you know, the Supreme Court has made it more difficult, but they have not made it impossible. There are things that the executive branch, powers the executive branch has, that can minimize the damage that the court caused yesterday.
And the president, he's also urging Congress, we're seeing, to clarify the limits on birthright citizenship. And this is something that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas indicated could be within the scope of the Constitution. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson responding. Watch.
Clearly an issue that merits the attention of Congress. I don't know what the remedy is, how to define it, or the timeline. It would be premature for me to project that. But I will tell you that it's a big concern with the American people because it's been abused.
So, Ira, you've already mentioned some of them, but what other avenues avenues does the U.S. government here have as a whole to stop this problem at its source?
Well, you know, as you saw, even the speaker himself isn't quite sure exactly what powers are at hand. You know, this is obviously something that he and his caucus are going to have to address. You know, Congress can pass laws. The question is, with the Supreme Court having ruled on President Trump's executive order, would they be willing to revisit this at some later time? So that's something we will have to find out. But Congress certainly can authorize more money to guard our borders, other things, restrictions on visas to people who should not be coming to the United States. There are a whole range of things that they can do, but it would have been a lot easier if the Supreme Court had recognized that subject to the jurisdiction isn't simply that you're here and you have to stop at the red lights like the rest of us, but there's more to it, that you have to be subject to the greater jurisdiction, the sovereign jurisdiction of the United States, which foreign nationals are not.
Yeah, and we're going to be keeping an eye on what is going to go on next with this. Ira Melman, thank you for joining us tonight. And the House is leaving Washington earlier than planned after Republicans failed to advance a rule linking the Save America Act to the National Defense Authorization Act. The vote stalled the House agenda, sending lawmakers home for recess. Here's NTD's Chris Bob.
Bill Pulte's a very talented guy, but he's just there temporarily until Jay Clayton. And Jay Clayton is going through the process. And Jay Clayton, highly respected, and so is Bill Pulte. But Bill is there just for a fairly short period of time. But while he's there, I said you can declassify whatever you want.
President Trump spent the week escalating pressure across multiple fronts tied to the Save America Act. He says Jay Clayton's confirmation as Director of National Intelligence will not move forward unless his preferred U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York is confirmed. President Trump said he will hold off on FISA action until the election integrity measure is addressed. He also declined to sign the bipartisan housing bill, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act.
I hope he does sign it. If he doesn't, it's still law. We'll still celebrate it. But he's trying to make a point, and I think he's making it very effectively.
House Republicans then tried to attach the Save America Act to the must-pass defense bill before sending both to the Senate.
What we're going to do is we're going to pass a MERV, or what's better known as a merge, but they'll be voting to merge onto that the Save America Act that we passed back in February. So that will send both of those items together over to the Senate.
The strategy failed when 13 Republicans joined Democrats to defeat the rule, blocking debate on the defense bill and bringing the House agenda to a halt before recess. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, one of the Republicans opposing bills leaving the House without the Save America Act passed, saying,
I will go through the rule if you allow my amendment for voter ID plus proof of citizenship to be placed into the text of the NDAA. They're saying they won't, so now you saw what happened on the floor.
The House and Senate returned to Washington on July 13th, at which time these issues, save perhaps the housing bill, will be debated. Chris Bob, NTD News.
Don't get paid.
And you're looking at a socialist candidate swept the New York Democratic primary election. Another Democratic socialist has won in Colorado. Naylat Quiros has ousted incumbent Democratic Congresswoman Diana DeGette in Colorado's 1st Congressional District. Joining me now to discuss this are our panelists for tonight. Jason Palmer is co-founder of Together and former Democratic presidential candidate, and Kate Monroe is a Republican strategist and Marine Corps veteran. Thank you both so much for being on tonight. So we've got this Democratic socialist, right? Naylat Quiros, ousting longtime Democratic Representative Diana DeGette in Colorado's 1st Congressional District. President Trump earlier this week actually reacted to the surge in Democratic socialism. Here he is. Take a look.
Well, I think it's a big threat to our nation, actually. Because it's not socialism, it's really communism. They use the word social democrat because it sounds so nice, but it's really communism you're talking about. I think it's the biggest threat to our nation there is, maybe since our founding. That includes World War I, World War II, September 11th.
All right, Jason, I want to start with you. This outcome in Colorado, it comes as New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. He's declared this intent to transform the Democratic Party. We're seeing he's in talks with former Vice President Kamala Harris, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Is this the end of the Democratic Party as we know it?
No, it's definitely not the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. It's interesting that everybody's focusing on the candidate being a Democratic socialist. I also noticed that the candidate is 29 years old, and the voters are saying they want young people to go represent them in Washington. They don't want people that are 65, 75 years old. They want change. Now, democratic socialism, it's important to say, is not the same as communism. We're not talking about
Oh,
becoming
bullcrap.
communist China or communist Russia. Democratic socialism is things like Medicare, Social Security, public schools. There are many parts of our economy that are capitalist, and I'm a capitalist, and proudly so. But there are parts of our economy that are democratic socialist, where we believe
They want to
everybody
do away
should have
with all of it.
healthcare. Every young person should be able to go to school, and we do have a mixed economy. So this is not as radical as everyone thinks. It's actually the people of Colorado and the people of New York want young people in Washington.
Kate, what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think that people do want younger people, and I agree on both sides, on the left and the right. It is a time for people to come up. I do think 29 is a little bit young. You know, sometime maybe at the end of Gen X, which is where I'm at, about 47 years old, I'd like to see us make our way onto the main stage. But I think it's easy to get beguiled into wanting these things. Everybody wants healthcare. Everybody wants all of these things that they think that they don't have to pay for. They're neat. They're shiny. It's like when somebody's running for, you know, high school, what do you call it? The like high school president, and they're going to say everybody's going to get pizza. They don't realize that the cafeteria has to agree to make the pizza every single day, you know. So I think that what people actually want versus what's going to be delivered is there's going to be a lot of disparity there. But I do think that if that's what people
How
are
many
leaning
of them
toward,
are
on the left
supported
and on the
by
right, well, be a
Antifa?
little bit smarter. If really, you know, the left is saying we don't want this really left socialism, and on the right we certainly don't want it, then somewhere in the middle of the left and the right, we need to take a stand and do something different that is palatable to the American people.
Jason, what do you make of what Kate is saying there? You know, that these are nice promises to make, but keeping them, I mean, that's a different issue.
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of what Kate just said. I think if Kate and I were in charge in Washington, we would have a lot of bipartisan compromise and good bills being passed on housing, healthcare, immigration, other things. But I do think, you know, another way to think about this movement is it's kind of like the Tea Party movement for the Democratic Party. The article I was just reading a few seconds ago said that if all of these very progressive candidates win, then there will be 43 Democratic socialists in the House, or extremely progressive left members. That still leaves another 165, 170 people in the Democratic Party who are more like me, who are more center-left, believe in capitalism, believe in Medicare, believe in Social Security, believe in having a mixed economy with good government. That's what we really need. And we need to be passing laws in Washington and actually moving the country forward, not engaging in this bickering where the crazies on the left and the crazies on the right are getting all the attention.
Well, Kate, I also want to touch on something here. Most people in Mela Kiros's district have college degrees, and a large portion we see are young women. Why are these individuals specifically shifting to the far left?
Well, I mean, I think we want to pretend like they don't indoctrinate people in college, but I think that there is something to be said for that. You have a lot of kids, like even my own cousins, who in high school, their parents are very staunch Republicans, very fiscally conservative, and then their kids went to college away from them and then came back full on left socialists. And I think at the time they don't have jobs, they haven't had to pay for anything yet, they're not running businesses, and all that sounds like all well and good, because in college a lot of the stuff is paid for and given to you, so your impression is that that should continue, but that's just not reality. I think people wake up in their 30s, you know, like when they're 30, 35 years old, and go, wow, how did I think that was really going to work in the long term? And as somebody who served in the Marine Corps, somebody who has had, you know, VHA, veteran health care, I can tell you that this lie that people get peddled about universal health care, it's not very good. There's got to be a different answer between everybody gets free health care and health care costs way too much. Somewhere in the middle is the answer that both sides need to work on. I just spoke at the Lincoln Reagan dinner, and I said, if we just put all our pettiness aside, we really sure could accomplish a lot more. If we were more mission focused and instead of being self-focused on my own brand, me fundraising, me getting in, maybe we could do something good for the American public.
I think that's a great message for both sides, you know, putting the greater good before yourself. But I want to take a look now at the Capitol and pivot to the Save America Act for a moment. A dozen House Republicans are all engaged in this standoff that has effectively shut down the House floor at this point. Speaker Mike Johnson calling an early recess. Here's his comments yesterday. Watch.
I don't know how many times I can say this. As you all know, we've passed the Save America Act in one of its various forms 3 times in the House already. We will pass it again this week when the NDAA passes. The Save America Act, as passed in February unanimously by all Republicans.
Okay, so Jason, sometimes an outsider might have a clearer picture of a situation. What is going on within the House GOP in terms of your analysis?
Well, the main thing that's going on is that the Speaker of the House is sending everybody home, and the SAVE Act isn't going to pass again, nor is the bipartisan housing compromise that was worked on for about 6 months by smart people on both sides of the aisle. But, the Speaker is in a box right now. He's being asked to pass another version of the SAVE Act. He's actually correct that he has passed it. His group has passed it multiple times, and it keeps failing in the Senate. So it is I do
Democrats
feel his pain,
don't want it.
Why?
Why?
He cannot do any more than he's already done. This has failed in the Senate, and President Trump is still demanding that it pass, but is looking at the wrong house to do so.
Okay, the Speaker is kind of stuck in a hard spot right now, and I mean, the Republican Party is quite unified on the issue of election integrity. So what's the basis here of this lack of consensus now? What's preventing Senate action on this act?
Well, I mean, if you don't want to pass this law, it says quite a lot about who you think your constituents are, who you think your voter base is. I think when they've polled the U.S. population, most people have said, yes, there should be voter ID laws. You should have to prove that you are a citizen. As somebody I was in charge of the border vets, I went down to the border many times with razor wire, basically to show the American public we don't have to go quietly into the night. I can tell you that I saw thousands and thousands of people cross the border that are likely to be able to vote here, that are going to get their kids in through birthright citizenship. There's so many things going on in our nation, and we're only looking like a day ahead, a year ahead. We're not looking 10, 20, 30 years down the road and the ramifications of how we could easily lose our country by a slow death to painful suicide of our own making if we don't get it in order.
Well, Jason, to Kate's point there, this partially comes down to proof of citizenship. Do you think displays like this will intensify in light of the recent Supreme Court we saw ruling on birthright citizenship?
I do think something is brewing here. Kate's right that 70% of Americans think you should have to show some form of voter identification at the time that you vote. However, this is kind of a ginned up issue because every time they've researched this, it's very small numbers, like 1, 2, 3 people who actually vote out of millions who are not citizens. And the reason why is you have to actually come up, identify yourself, sign your name. And a lot of illegal immigrants know they don't want to do that because they could be arrested and they could be put in jail. So there are not a lot of illegal immigrants who are actually voting in our elections. This has been researched and studied many times. And the problem is that this bill is requiring things too. Like it actually would prevent women from voting if their driver's license, which might be in their maiden name, disagrees with their actual now married name. And so
stupid.
Just trying to force this through at the very end, right before an election, is not a smart thing to do. And a lot of Republicans and all Democrats realize that this is not a bipartisan compromise. This is a very, Republican-only bill, not written very well, not the right type of thing to do before an election, where it will make it seem like the election is rigged if we were to pass something like this. Plus, the Supreme Court just ruled that this is not Washington's to decide, that these elections are conducted at the state level, and the states decide the rules for each of the states. So it's not going to pass. It's a terrible law, and it's a good thing it's not going to pass because it would cause all kinds of mayhem in our November elections.
Crap.
So, Kate, Jason there is bringing up a lot of
homeless people have IDs, for God's sake.
The Save America Act right now. Is there still a commitment within the GOP to passing the Save America Act?
Oh, I think they still definitely want to pass it. And I want to address the question you asked earlier about why are so many young women making their way over to the socialist left. It's because of rhetoric like this. If you get married and you need to go change your name, go and change your name. It is an absolute fallacy. I live here in California. Nobody asked for my ID. There's many states that don't require it. I could have gotten voted 10 times probably, and it wouldn't have mattered here in the state of California. But if your voter registration matches your old name and it matches your driver's license, you'll be able to vote just fine. It's absolute nonsense that they're going to stop doing that. If you go change your voter reg to your new name and you don't change your driver's license, that's a you problem. That is not the federal government's problem. That is not a problem you need to put onto the people to stop immigrants from voting. They will start voting here. We let in 10 million. To think that they're not going to, it is absolutely ridiculous. And those two things coupled together with the birthright citizenship is a scary spot for us. Not only are women making their way over to being a left socialist, they're also not having kids. But these people that we left in are outnumbering us in procreation almost 10 to 1. So we will lose our nation. It's not just some talking point.
All right, well, we're going to be keeping an eye on the Hill and seeing what Speaker Johnson has got planned next. Jason Palmer, Kate Monroe, thank you for joining us tonight.